Good afternoon and welcome. We're glad to have you for today's webinar, Inclusive Leadership, Building Cultures of Belonging. I'm Mac Ingram, Director of Engagement in the Office of Alumni Affairs. A disclaimer, this presentation is academic in nature, grounded in Dr. Gorman's research, scholarship, and expertise. It is not a reflection of UAB's policies or protocols, and statements do not represent UAB. Also, as with any virtual event, occasional technical hiccups may occur. If you experience any video or audio issues, simply reconnect or refresh your screen to return to the presentation quickly. Before we dive in, we'd love to learn a bit about you. Please take a moment to answer this quick poll. When you hear inclusive leadership, what comes to mind first? Making sure all voices are heard, addressing bias, supporting collaboration, creating psychological safety, or leading with self-awareness? Go ahead and make your selection, and we'll take a look at those results in just a moment. Just a heads up, we are recording today's webinar. Our live audience will get an email with the link once it is ready, most likely early next week. We're excited to have Dr. Alan Gorman back with us for the 6th time. An associate professor of management at UAB, he was also chair of the Department of Management, Information Systems, and Quantitative Methods in the Collette School of Business. He earned his BA from the University of Georgia, his master's from the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and his PhD from the University of Tennessee. Today's webinar is the third of our 4-part series, our leadership series. Back in January, we kicked things off with the Evolving Leader from Authority to Authenticity with Dr. Alan Gorman, where we explored how important being real is in leadership. Last month, Dr. Matthew Scherer joined us for the Humble Narcissist, Leading with Humility, where we explored the delicate balance between narcissism and humility in leadership. We'll close down the series on April 22nd when Dr. Scherer returns to present Leading Infinitely, Building Teams, Trust, and Vision. This webinar will have you rethinking how leadership works in a world without finish lines. Now, for the results, I'm going to pull up those results. It looks like we are at 61%, making sure all voices are heard. We have 11% at supporting collaboration. Looks like we also had 15% at leading with self-awareness. And then it's 7% creating psychological safety and 3% addressing bias. So thanks for those responses. Before we turn things over to Dr. Gorman, we like to ask what the biggest barrier to inclusion is in most organizations. Okay, your options are unconscious bias, lack of communication, limited representation, resistance to change, or time and resource constraints. We'll keep this poll up for a bit so you can select your response, and I will toss those results in the chat. At this time, I'd love to turn things over to Dr. Gorman. Dr. Gorman, thanks again for being with us.
All right. Thank you, Mac. Pleasure to be here. I can't believe this is the 6th one of these I've done. I'm grateful to you all for the invitation. Grateful to be here. So yeah, I want to talk to you all about inclusive leadership. And when I say that word inclusive leadership, I'm not talking about inclusive leadership as though it's a particular style of leadership. Whatever style of leadership you want to talk about, whether it's, I've talked before about compassionate leadership, I've done research on that, and servant leadership. And I don't really like the term style anyway, because really what we're really interested in is the behaviors, and you can modify those behaviors depending upon the situation that you're in. And in fact, that's really what we should be doing as effective leaders is matching our behaviors to the needs of our followers. So with all that being said, what I'm going to talk about today is not a style as though it's inclusive and then there's different styles. It's how can we as leaders be more inclusive? What are the behaviors we should be thinking about? How do we do some of those? What are some of the take-home Monday morning things that I can be doing to be more inclusive? So that's what I want to focus on today. A few, thinking about inclusive leadership, we know from great research and practice what people want these days, in this day and age especially, is they want to feel like they belong to something. And when I teach my students, younger generations today, more and more, more than when I was their age, I'll say, they really want to feel like they belong to something important in the workplace. They want to feel like they belong to something bigger and better, and that they're contributing to something that's bigger than themselves. And what most people really want is, I want to feel like when I come to work, like I feel like I actually belong there, that I feel comfortable, that I can contribute, that I can say things that need to be said, that I can make this place a great place to work. But here's the problem. We don't necessarily work in organizations that reward or incentivize that. 40% of people say they feel isolated at work, which is a huge red flag for if you're talking about commitment or engagement. There was a great article that just came out that talked about the loneliness epidemic at work, and how people, even when they show up to the workplace at their job day in and day out, they still feel lonely because they don't feel like they are a part of something meaningful. The people in that organization, and those organizations do not feel, they're not creating spaces where people feel like they can contribute and have meaning. 56% of desired leadership attributes globally focus on hope more than trust, compassion, or stability, which we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And when people do not feel that they belong, they get alienated, they burn out. That's when poor performance creeps in. And the thing that I tell people these days, it's not about, making quotas or numbers or whatever you want to call it. It's a feeling that I truly belong in this workplace. And that's what I say is, it's not a nice to have. We know it's a key driver of so many important things in the workplace, and it seems to only becoming more important. And so the central question we're really trying to answer here is, can I show up, feel safe, feel like I can contribute, that I have a voice, and that I matter? So that's what we're going to focus on. So when I say inclusive leadership, I'm really talking about three kind of key behaviors here, or phenomenon. One is that inclusion piece, that people are invited to come in, to join the conversation, to work alongside, to have voice. They're treated fairly. They're given access to information. They're treated as though they're worthy of seeing information, contributing to decision making, these kinds of things. And then that's the inclusion piece. And then the second part of that is, and you've probably heard a lot about this already, I've talked about it in other talks, psychological safety. But psychological safety is that idea that if I am a part of a team at work, if I'm a part of a unit, a work organization, a department, I feel like if there are things that need to be said, I feel like I can say those things without fear of repercussion. And the research is very clear at this point. Amy Edmondson, who came up with this term, has done tons of research, and her colleagues. And what they found is that psychological safety it doesn't necessarily cause all these great things. But what it is, it's a key driver of satisfaction, commitment, well-being at work, better performance. And it's, you can think of it kind of like the missing ingredient. Like, what do we need to have for our team to go to the next level? Well, we can have a great team full of really smart people, but if there are people on the team that don't feel like they can speak up because somebody might say something derogatory, or they may not like what they have to say, or maybe it's bringing up something negative that, could impact the team. They may have to go back to the drawing board on our project or whatever that might look like. We know these things matter and they're important. So having that psychological safety is that second component. And then the third, I talked a second ago about belonging. So I'm invited to the conversation. I feel like I can have something to say, and you're not going to hold that against me, or I'm not going to get repercussions for it. But then I also feel like, okay, I belong at this place. I feel respected. I'm welcome. My opinions are valued, and I'm able to contribute I'm able to contribute authentically, meaning I can be the person that I want people to see me as, and I feel comfortable doing that. I talked last time about, there's this debate about authentic leadership, and some people are saying, oh, well, don't be authentic because we don't need authentic jerks in the workplace. And what I keep saying is, I'm not talking about being authentically a jerk. I'm saying being authentically the person that you want to be, that feels like you can have a difference and that you can have impact and you do a job that's worthwhile and meaningful. That's what we want when we talk about authenticity, is we can authentically be the best person we can be at work. And I'm not talking, I've said this over and over and over again, and I'll say it again. I'm not talking about being overly nice. I'm not talking about the kind person who's just, sky is falling down and you're the person that's, oh, it's fine, we'll be okay. Like, I'm not saying that at all. It's perfectly reasonable, and I would say expected, that we can be inclusive but also have high standards. And I would argue that's what we need to be doing, right? And one of the most, when I talked about compassion before, one of the most compassionate things we can do is to hold people accountable, because we have to be compassionate not just for them, but for the people who are also doing an excellent job. Sometimes what we find in organizations is those people who are doing an excellent job, if they're going way above and beyond the bar, but nobody else is, and those people get extra time or extra incentives or extra resources, and the people who are the high performers don't, what happens? The high performers get mad, they get irritated, and they say, what's the point? Why am I exerting myself at such a high level and there's no reward or incentive for that? Inclusive leadership is not just performative niceness, just to be nice to everybody just because it's, feel good kind of thing to do. It's being clear, being fair, holding people accountable, but doing it in a way that invites everyone to the conversation and invites them to have impact. So, again, and I work with all kinds of leaders in the business community, and I'll hear this time to time. Oh, yeah, that sounds great, but that's kind of like too foo-foo, too lollipops, rainbows for our organization. And I always go back to, I'm a numbers guy. What do the numbers say? And the numbers point to, the research is pretty clear. When you have this feeling of belongingness in your organization, estimates are up to 56% higher job performance, 50% lower turnover. People take fewer sick days. I just talked to my class yesterday about this. One of the things that happens with people, when employees, when they feel like they're not treated fairly, when they're not committed, when they're not satisfied with their job, they're way more likely to call in sick, knowing they're not sick at all. Why do we do that? Well, if we work at a place that we don't care about and we think doesn't care about us, it's a lot easier for us to say, I'm not going to come in today. So we take fewer of those sick days when we feel like we belong. And organizations are 73% more likely to reap revenue from innovation that occurs by inviting more of those voices. I'll talk about this in a little bit, but one of the things we know from research is that if you invite more people to the table, if you create that bigger table and you invite more of those voices, you're going to get more ideas just by inviting more of those people and listening to what they have to say and actually listening and incorporating those things that you may not have been hearing before because they may not have been invited to the conversation. We also know inclusive organizations are up to 50% more likely to make better decisions, up to 36% more likely to outperform on profitability. So again, I go back to, I really hate to introduce these things and think about it from the business case, because I'm always like, do you really need to have a business case to be a decent person? Do you really need to have a business case to be compassionate? Like, I don't like having to do that, but I realize people in the business world care about those metrics. And if you can link what we're talking about to those metrics, then you're making a strong case to business leaders in this day and age. So I always start with, okay, let's get the business case out of the way, but then I've made the connection. Now let's talk about how you can actually do some of these things. So I talked about hope in the very beginning. This comes from a Gallup poll, this last Gallup poll. And they wanted to know, what do followers really need from leaders? And they said there's 4 really key things that followers want from their leaders. They want a sense of hope. They want to feel like they can trust that leader. They want their leader to be compassionate, and they want them to be stable, reliable. I can come to you when I need something. I'll be able to depend on you. I want to know when you come in tomorrow morning, you're going to be the same person that I dealt with today. They want stability there. And what I think is that what this is telling us is that people want a sense of hope, in the sense that they want, what's that path forward going to look like? And especially in this day and age, when we talk about things like hope, you'll hear hope is not a strategy, that kind of stuff. And I get that. But what people want from their leadership is to say, look, we don't know what it's going to look like tomorrow. I mean, the way things are changing, the way the world is right now, who knows what tomorrow is going to look like? But what we want to hear from our leaders is, I don't know what's going to happen, but I can tell you right now, I'm going to work with you, and we are going to figure it out together. We are going to strategize. We are going to come up with a plan, and it's not going to be my plan. It's going to be our plan, and we're going to do this together. That's what people want in organizations today. They don't want to be lied to and tell them, yeah, everything's going to be great. And they don't want to, be told the sky is falling. They want leaders who are realistic, but give them a sense that if we do this, we're going to do this together. And that's what that hope drives us to have, that sense of belongingness and inclusiveness, which we'll talk about. So I talked about psychological safety. There's extensive research on this. But what's driving that sense of belonging is this idea of that psychological safety. So if you look at what's happening in terms of driving that belonging, you've got employees having a sense of voice, meaning there's a whole line of research on voice, and it's basically this idea: do I feel like if I need to speak up, can I speak up? So, for example, if I see people performing unsafe behaviors at work, can I tell somebody this is not safe? Or even better, if I have somebody that above me, let's say I'm a nurse and I see a doctor doing something unsafe, is it appropriate and safe for me to tell that doctor or somebody else, hey, this isn't right. So, people could get hurt. People could die from this. So having that sense of voice is an important part of that. And then the next iteration of that is learning. Do I work in an organization where if I make a mistake, I'm going to get pounded down and I'm going to get in trouble because I made a mistake? Or is it going to be a learning opportunity? And so this is what I mean when I say mistakes become information. Those mistakes that we're making, when we get in trouble or we get criticized or we get ostracized because of mistakes, we don't learn anything from that. We learn, what do we learn? And we've seen this from years of research. We learn not to say anything. If we make a mistake, because if I make a mistake and I'm just going to get hammered down because of it, what am I going to do? I'm not going to tell you I made a mistake because I'm going to get in trouble. But when we openly and honestly report those mistakes, that mistake becomes a source of information that we can use to improve. That then improves our decision quality. When everybody has that feeling of voice, when everybody can say, here's things that we've noticed, here's mistakes we made, let's learn from that, then the quality of our decisions, the quality of our engagement, our conversations, all that goes up. And then what does that allow us to do? That improves that sense of resilience, or the idea that, hey, it's okay if we make a mistake, because we can talk about those mistakes. We can learn from I can learn from your mistake. You can learn from mine. And then through that, we learn and make better decisions. And through that, we can bounce back. When we make future mistakes, it's not going to be traumatic. It's not going to be the end of the world, because guess what? We've been there, done that. We learn from that. We're going to do the same thing next time. So again, I go back to, it's not about representation. Representation is great. You need representation from all kinds of different backgrounds of people. But if you have representation, but those people from a certain background don't feel like they belong or don't feel like they can say anything, then what's the point? What they really need is a culture of belonging where they feel like they're a part of everything going on. They feel like they're a part of something meaningful. They can have that voice. They can bring up things that need to be brought up, and they're a part of a team. They're a part of something that's bigger and better than just themselves. So I keep coming back to this when I talk about representation. Representation is only one part of it. The bigger issue is, do people feel like they really are a part of something bigger and better? Okay, so I've talked a lot about belonging and inclusion. Well, how do we actually start to live these things? This comes from a newsletter I wrote a while back for the Office of Wellness, and they asked me to write something about how do we build belongingness in everyday acts? And I said, so I wrote this, and I said, it's not, and I'm a strong believer in this, the culture that we have in organizations is not words on a wall. It's not a policy manual that says here's what we're about. It's not something up on the side of your building. Your culture is what you live and breathe every single day, and that is put forth in all of the ordinary moments that happen at work. And so everything that we do in organizations, I teach this to my students when I teach leadership. If we're in leadership roles, we can't underestimate how important the signals that we send to the people who are looking to us, to our followers, to our employees, our team members. They're all looking to me as a leader to guide their own behavior, because they want to know what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. So if I say, it's really important that we're all here on time and we stay till, your shift is over, but then I show up late every day and leave early every day, well, then what's the rest of the team going to think? Well, punctuality is not really that important. So it's how we show up every single day and how we can those everyday behaviors that send signals to people that belongingness does matter. So, for one, and this is such a simple one, but it's one we don't think about, ask better questions. Instead, approach things with instead of, well, why didn't you get that done? Maybe something like, is there something going on that I can help you with? Is there a barrier I can help break down for you so that we can achieve that result, so we can meet that deadline, whatever that might look like? If I ask that question, why isn't that done? Then I'm sending a signal very clearly to that person that the only thing I care about is that this is done. And whatever you say back to me really isn't going to matter, because if you just give me some excuse, I've already made the decision that there's some reason you didn't get this done, and I'm going to hold you to the wall over that. Versus, keep that in mind with what I just said. What is it I can do to help you to achieve whatever this thing? Now I've put myself in the same situation. I'm on the same team with you, and we're going to do this together. So ask better questions, first of all. Number one, ask questions. That's an important starting point. But then respond with curiosity. So things like, simple things. Help me understand more about this. Tell me more about that. Not, you didn't get it done, whatever the punishment is from that. Respond with curiosity. I want to learn. I want to figure out how I can help you, how we can achieve things together. And then going back to what I was talking about with resilience, or having that sense of voice, modeling vulnerability. As a leader, saying something as simple as, I don't know, but you know what? I'm going to find out the answer. I've seen way too many leaders who, even if they don't know the answer, they pretend that they do. And then what they end up saying makes absolutely no sense. And then it's very clear that they really had no clue what the answer was. But those insecure leaders don't want to feel insecure, and they want to feel like they're in control all the time. One of the first things we need to do in leadership roles, break down that barrier, right? Check your ego at the door. This is not, when you're in leadership role, it's not about you at all. It's about your team. So being humble, breaking down that barrier and saying, I don't know, but I'm going to find out the answer. And something I almost never hear from leaders, you know what? I was wrong. I screwed up. I messed up on that decision. Here's why I made the decision I made. This is the information that I had, so this is why I did it. Turns out it wasn't the best move. I apologize. Here's what we're going to do to rectify that, to make it better, to get better as a team. It's very rare these days to hear people in those positions say, I was wrong, I own that, and I'm going to help fix it. So that's another one. And then making it safe to ask questions, that sense of psychological safety and having voice, making it safe for people to actually asking a question. You probably have been in meetings before where it's, people want to get out of the meeting. So when the person says, does anybody have any questions? Everybody says, nope, let's go. Right. That's not really what we want. We want those occasions where we bring people together. And I'm going to talk more about meetings. We want those occasions to be times when people feel safe to ask questions, whatever that might be. A question is an invitation to you as a leader. That person is saying, I need help here. I'm not fully understanding. That's an opportunity for you as a leader to say, let me help you get to where you need to be. Let me share with you what I know so that we can get some sort of common consensus on that. So making it safe to ask those questions. And then again, it sounds easy, straightforward, but protect people's dignity. If somebody does make a mistake, don't call them out in front of everybody, or blame them or make excuses. Praise in public, praise openly and generously, but use those coaching moments in private when you're with that person one-on-one and you say, look, here's an opportunity for us to learn. I didn't want to do this in front of everybody, but I think this is a great learning opportunity for both of us. And here's what I'm thinking, right? And then related to that, and I talked about this when I talked about toxic workplaces. One of the things we see in toxic workplaces is open hostility, open disrespect. If you're a leader and you see open disrespect, it's your job to tamp that down. It's your job to say, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to have people being disrespectful, rude, hurtful to each other. We're not going to say hurtful things. As soon as you see those things, you got to cut that out. Why? Because guess what? Other people are watching you, right? They're watching you to determine how they are going to respond. And if they see you as a leader and you say, I'm just not even going to address that. Well, that's license for everybody to be disrespectful, to be rude. You got to cut that out early. You have to protect people's dignity. This is one of the most basic things. If you can't protect people's dignity, you've lost them. Because if I see somebody being rude or disrespectful for somebody else and the leader doesn't do anything, I know that person doesn't care. So am I going to go to that leader to say anything? No, I know they don't care. So you have sent me a very clear signal that we do not matter here, that dignity does not matter. So work your hardest to protect people's dignity. I talk a lot about meetings. In fact, we should have a session just on meetings. Anybody that knows me knows I detest meetings unless you have something that clearly needs to be discussed openly. You have a decision that needs to be made that you need everybody's input on. You have a clear agenda. You have something that requires everyone to be together. Otherwise, my favorite saying is, this meeting could have been an email. And the reason I say that, it's not just the productivity lost or the minutes or hours we lose to these things, but it's just basic human decency to respect people's time. Everybody's super busy. And if we have an hour meeting where nothing is being accomplished and no one has any clue what's going on, you're just wasting everybody's time. So knowing that, there are things that we can do in meetings, and I focus on meetings a lot because meetings are one of the few areas or the few times when everybody is together, either in a department, in a unit, across an entire school, whatever that looks like. Very often it's the only time where everybody's together. So there's a lot of messaging and signaling going on all at the same time. And people are watching everything that's going on, right? And somebody asked me a while ago, like, what am I paying attention to in meetings? I'm paying attention to everything. I can see who's sitting next to each other, who's at the head of the table, and why. What's the body language of the people who are sitting at the table? Is it clear they don't want to be here? Stuff like that. But there are things that we can do to be more inclusive. Number one, and I can say this as an introvert, introverts don't want to be at your meeting in the first place. If you're going to ask an introvert to talk about something that they're going to talk about openly with other people, you need to give them the time to sit and think about that topic before they get to that meeting. And I can't stand when I go to a meeting and the person running the meeting will say, we need to talk about X, Y, and Z. What do you all think about it? And then guess what happens? All the extroverts start having these conversations with each other. And the introverts are all in the back saying, I don't know. I hadn't even thought about that topic. I really need to think and gather my thoughts. I need time to do that. So first and foremost, if you're going to ask people to talk about something, send an agenda ahead of time that lays out clearly what you're going to talk about, so that if I'm an introvert, I can show up to that meeting knowing, okay, I need to form a thought or an opinion about this thing, and I need to do it in a way that I sound coherent. I sound like I'm having something useful to say. Number one, you got to have an agenda. Share an agenda ahead of time. I often say, like, if you don't have an agenda, it doesn't sound like a meeting that I want to be at. Everybody should always have an agenda. Share the context and the criteria. If we need to make a decision, I need to know that going into this meeting, that we're going to be making a decision, and here's what a final decision is going to look like. We need to decide this, and this by the end of this meeting. Or if we're going to park it to the next meeting, I need to know what that's going to look like. Invite questions or dissent in advance. And then if you send out an invite to the meeting and not everyone, it looks like not everyone who needs to be there has been invited, think about whose perspective can we really use in making this decision. And the flip side, I think, is just as important. We tend to get into meeting defaults where we invite everybody, and then there's only like 3 or 4 people whose opinion really matters to what we're doing. I often say the exact opposite. Does everybody need to be in this meeting? If it really only impacts this one single group of people, just talk to that group. Why do we have to invite the entire unit, the entire department? It's not a good use of everybody's time. During the meeting, if I'm in a leadership role, this is so important, again, from a signaling perspective. If I start off the meeting and I give everybody my immediate opinion, what's everybody else thinking? Oh, well, you already told me what your opinion is. Well, then that's what we're going to do. I mean, why are we sitting around here talking about it, right? If I'm in a leadership role, my job is to get your input before I say a word. And I make that clear in the meeting. Hey, this is why we're meeting. You've got your agenda. We're going to talk about this, but I'm not going to say anything until I've had the opportunity to hear thoughts on everything, right? That way, I want to know what are people honestly thinking, not parroting what I already think, because that's what a lot of people are going to do. They're going to be, oh yeah, that sounds great. Let's get out of here. Time for lunch, right? I want to know, what are you all thinking? And this is something I do a lot, simply because I forget a lot of things very, very quickly. But at the end of every meeting, I always say, what are we missing? What angle are we not thinking about this from? Another one of my favorites is, let's imagine that this whole thing just goes south super fast. Why did it go south? What in all of our enthusiasm to make this thing happen, what did we miss that we should have been thinking about earlier? And then pause long enough. Don't answer it yourself. Pause long enough to listen to what people have to say. And people will tell you what they think is missing. And then rotate airtime. Again, not to pick on my extrovert friends. I have plenty of extroverted friends. But they're the ones who are going to talk up first. They're the ones who are going to talk the longest. They're going to talk the loudest. Rotate that airtime so that enough people. And if, for instance, if there's somebody in the back, but it's clear they have something to say, it's okay to say, hey, John, what do you think? Because you want to know their opinion. And if John says, I don't really have anything to contribute, okay, cool. You gave John an opportunity to contribute. But I want to make sure everybody's voice is heard. Another thing, which I don't see nearly enough, if you made a decision, document that. Put it in a put it in a meeting minutes, send it out to everybody and ask, hey, is everybody okay with these minutes? Most people aren't even going to look at it, but at least you gave people an opportunity to document who owns each of those decisions. What's the deadline? What's for the next time we meet, what needs to have happened? If you had to cut corners, if there's a trade-off, people need to understand why. Why did we do this and not this? And again, circle back to those quieter contributors. If John says he doesn't want to say anything in the meeting, as a leader, I might go up to John later and say, hey, you didn't share anything in the meeting. Is there something you want to share with me privately? And John might say, yeah, I just didn't want to talk about it in front of other people. So circle back to those people and see, did you miss something that they wanted to share but didn't feel like they could do that? So for this, I'll start with what we shouldn't be doing. Never, ever, ever in an organization should people be publicly shamed, treated rudely, treated with sarcasm. I say that, and of course, I get emails every other day from people asking about toxic work situations, and the things I've heard that people encounter, it's just shocking what happens in the workplace. There should be a minimum level of decency that we should all be held to in work situations, and those are things we should not be doing. Hiding behind policy instead of leading. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, and I'll say it openly and honestly. If you're hiding behind policy in terms of decision making, you're not leading. Now, it's one thing to say, well, policy says you need to do this because you have to do this in order to be safe, right? If you've got some sort of safety-oriented policy, okay, sure, that's a policy. But if your policy says, this is your second warning, now I have to fire you, but then, I don't think that this person may have shown up late because, they've got small kids and they can't find childcare. Is that policy really appropriate? Or is this an opportunity for me to step up and lead? That's something that takes a lot of courage and conviction. But at the end of the day, to me, it's the right thing to do. Avoiding vague, and I hear this from time to time, well, that person just wasn't a cultural fit. What does that mean? If they weren't a cultural fit because they were a decent person and your organization's not, then sure. But what are the actual behaviors that you want from people? Do people understand that? Confusing comfort with inclusion. We're not talking about being complacent. We're talking about the ability to stand up and say something when things need to be said. And then I talked earlier about waiting too long to address disrespect. That's one of the first things you gotta get that out as soon as you can. So I go over some of the things we should be doing, which line up with this idea of belongingness with accountability. So how can I be more inclusive in my decision making? 4 easy steps, I think. 1, widen your input. Bring in perspectives from the people who are closest to the work. And I see this so many times. People making decisions who are 4 or 5 plus levels removed from the ground floor, making decisions about things that happen at the ground floor level when that person hasn't worked in that job. They may have never worked in that job, but they definitely have in a very long time. Why are the people who are on the ground level, who are doing the work, why are they not involved in the decision making? And sometimes you hear, well, these are high level decisions that, we can't have everybody's input on. Okay, sure. People need to be included, even if that's just one or a handful of people who are doing the work at the ground level. You need to be involving somebody, because I guarantee you and the reason I say this is because those decisions will impact people at the ground level, let's say customer facing. And the people doing the job are like, this makes no sense. We don't even do it this way. They don't understand how to even enact some of these decisions that they're seeing. So helping upper level leaders understand what's going on, you first need to include those people, widen that input. And not just at the ground level, all levels. Everybody needs to be included. If this is an important decision that's going to impact everybody, people need to be included in that. Make the criteria visible. How are we going to make this decision? This is what a good decision is going to look like. Check the impact. Who is not in the room? What are we not thinking about? If I'm making a decision that's going to impact somebody that wasn't in the room, I better be darn sure that I check with that person and say, hey, this thing that we're talking about, it's going to impact you, or it could impact you. I just want you to be aware of that. What do you need from me, or how can I help you to understand the situation? What do you need from me to do that? And then close the loop. If you make a decision, and this is another easy thing. If you make a decision, tell people the decision. Tell them why you made the decision. If there was alternatives that didn't get chosen, tell them why you didn't choose those alternatives. What did you learn from that? What are you going to do to move forward? Here's our plan of action moving forward. And then we're going to check in on that decision in, let's say, 3-6 months. Here's the decision I made. We're going to check back in 3 months, and we're going to see, is this the right decision that we should have made? And if it's not the right decision, guess what? We'll correct course. I'll admit that we didn't make the right decision, and then we'll make the decision that's needed at that time. And guess what? Most people are pretty okay with that, as long as you've included everybody and they feel like they actually have something to say. I've done work before on hybrid and remote teams. This is a big deal, because it's actually a pretty big deal when it comes to, if you're a remote hybrid worker, and this is no fault of your own, but one of the things we know is that people who are remote and hybrid workers very often get passed over for promotion or opportunities that may increase their visibility in the organization. Why? Because they're just not around. And when you're not around, very often you're not a part of the decision making. Very often you're not a part of, the water cooler conversation, and that's where a lot of the decision making is happening. So, some things that I would recommend is regardless of where you work, you want to make sure people have all the information that they need. And again, I've been on meetings where we got people in person and we got people on Zoom. We never even acknowledge the people on Zoom. And of course, if they're sitting there with black screens, they may not ever even have anything to say, but at least give them the opportunity to contribute something, making sure you've balanced airtime between people in the room and if they're remote. Measure, this is I wrote an article about this. It's not attendance theater. And this is when I talk about meetings, people think of it as like, just show up, check a box. It's like, no, we're here to achieve an outcome. Are we achieving that outcome as a result of having this meeting? It's not about who, if you showed up and had your screen on dark. It's, are you contributing? This is another, I always hate this when there's some contrived situation that is clearly like, let's take 2 minutes to play some silly game that nobody cares about. That's fine, but is that something you would normally do, or is it just something to, try and shake things up a bit? I tend to go, and this is my own perspective, I want to go straight for intentional connection. Like, how are you really doing? And when they say, I'm fine, no. How are you really doing? Tell me what's going on, with your work, your department, whatever it is that's going on. I want to achieve intentional connection. Now, not everybody wants that in return. Hey, that's cool. I'm completely fine with that. But at least I want to give people the opportunity. And of course, allowing flexibility. Recognition. These are super easy things we can do. And it's one of the things we often overlook the most. It is just a simple job well done. For most people in organizations, that's really all they want. They want a pat on the back. Just if I've done something good, just tell me, right? So how can we do that? Start a meeting. Hey, so-and-so, you did awesome last week. And be sincere and be appreciative. I want to recognize you in front of everybody, and just say thank you. Can we get a round of applause for that? Now, I've had faculty members in the past when I was chair who said, Alan, I can't stand that. Don't ever do that again. And I said, hey, not a problem. I just want to show you that there's an opportunity to recognize somebody. I want to do that. Check in on things beyond just how's work going. We hear that all the time. And of course, we just default to, yeah, great, whatever. Ask about, are there any barriers you're encountering? Do you need support? Are you feeling pressure? And what is that looking like? How can I help with that? And then noticing that inclusive behavior. So that curiosity that I talked about, the willingness to collaborate, squashing disrespectful behaviors, but at the same time, encouraging and incentivizing. And sometimes people misconstrue this. It's perfectly fine to show dissent. If you don't agree with something, I want to hear from you. Now, I want you to do it in a respectful way. But if I show dissent, number one, that shows that I care. No, this decision's not right. And let me tell you why. Now, not everybody's going to agree with whatever the decision is. But if I've given you the opportunity to show dissent and you don't agree, I've at least given you an opportunity. I've given you voice and I've heard what you have to say. And at the end of the day, we all have to make the decisions and move on. But I don't want to squash dissent. I want to encourage open, honest, meaningful debate. That's what we should be inviting that as a leader. Because why do we want that? That's what leads to better decisions in the long run. How do we know when people don't feel like they belong? I know I'm running out of time here. We got the same people dominating questions. People stop raising questions or raising awareness because they've made mistakes. They don't want to get in trouble again. Here's a really good one. When you have a new hire, if they get quiet really, really fast, they've learned that that's what I need to do. I need to shut up because I can't say anything because I don't know if I can trust people around here. That's a big one. Some people get flexibility, some don't. There's people get treated differently. There's only one-way street on feedback. It always goes top down. But true feedback should be top down, bottom up, and across. And if you ever hear any say the organization is political or careful, you know that's a red flag. So what can I do to be more inclusive? Do a better job listening. Do a better job with meetings. Stop the meetings if you don't need them. If you need them, make sure people feel like they can contribute, feel like they have something to say, and don't make people feel bad for voicing criticism or encouraging debate. Recognize people as much as you can, but hold people accountable. Okay, so to take with this, here's just a simple thing you can do. Think about, and this is when I teach leadership, this is one of the things I talk a lot about. When you interact with your subordinates, think about, how do people feel after they've had a conversation with me? If you imagine that you've had a conversation with someone and you think, well, that person didn't really say a lot, they may not ever come to me to talk about anything again, you're closing that person off to worthwhile conversation, having a voice, feeling a belonging. So think about how people feel when they interact with you. What you want them to feel is that it's safe for them to even have a conversation with you. You understand the standards, and that we're doing things on a daily basis to increase that sense of belonging, because that's what we really want in this organization. So I'll stop there. We got a couple of minutes for questions. Mac, if there's any that I can answer.
Absolutely. We did have a question. If you can, if you want to toss anything in right now, toss it in. I know I have one right here. It says, "What is the best way to maintain control of the meeting when you have someone who loves to dominate the conversation?"
I would have that conversation outside the meeting. And this is tough, because again, you want to be respectful of that person and let them know you care about their input. But I would also say, hey, we care about other people's input too. And I really appreciate what you have to say, but we only have 30 minutes or an hour in this meeting. If you want to contribute, I really honor and appreciate that, but we can't use the entire meeting for that. So an easy way to kind of get around that, and I've actually done this in the past. We got a bunch of people in the room. If you're going to say something, you've got 3 minutes. And once you've gone past that, and you have to let 2 other people talk before it comes back to you, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of that comes down to setting ground rules for the meeting. Here's how this meeting is going to occur. If you have clearly established ground rules, that makes that easier.
A lot easier. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next question. What does an employee student do even after speaking about the issues to a supervisor and to even HR? Nothing has been addressed, and still a supervisor is not willing to change the toxic environment.
$1 million question.
That might be another webinar.
I get this. I mean, when we did the toxic workplaces, I mean, this keeps coming up. Continuing to press, making sure that your voice is heard, even if it's HR. If it were me, I would document. Here's what happened. Here's the time and date. I went to HR. Nothing happened. If it's something that's important and something that is meaningful to you and nothing is being addressed, don't let it go. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then we'll end with this one. So when you speak of resistance, how do you handle when there is resistance in the office to the inclusive leadership?
Resistance from the employees for inclusive leadership?
I think so.
You got to think about building a better team. I mean, I would honestly, this is one of the things, if I'm a leader in that organization, when I'm hiring or thinking of bringing people into the team, you got to think about who's going to be a good member of this team. And if inclusivity, belongingness is important, then it should be important to everybody. Mm-hmm. Now that, again, easier said than done, right? That takes time. It takes, it may take a culture shift over time, but making it clear to everybody, if you're going to be a part of this team, these are our base values.
Yeah.
And if you're not fit with that, you might not be a good fit with this team.
Absolutely. Yeah, very good. Okay, one more did come in. How do I get this information formally, like a course, continuing education, seminars, for anybody attending interested in learning more?
I've all of the previous videos that we've done are on your website. Feel free to reach out to me and I can get you, there's tons of resources available for all this stuff. I didn't make all of it up. There's tons of resources. Contact me. If you get on my LinkedIn page, I've got tons of resources available, things I've written, videos. But yeah, just get in touch with me.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, Dr. Gorman, thank you so much. As always, it's incredible information and wonderful to hear. And I'm sure we'll find another time to see you back for the 7th time. So we appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to it, Mac. I appreciate everybody. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Just a quick reminder for today's audience, this webinar was recorded. Once it's uploaded to our website, we will get an email out with the link so you can revisit the session or share it with others. This email will likely be sent early next week. As for the next 4 webinars on tap for you, join us for the following. Come back for the leadership finale on April 22nd with Dr. Matthew Sharon, while he presents Leading Infinitely, Building Teams, Trust, and Vision. Then join us May 13th for Fueling Discoveries, Libraries at the Heart of Learning, as we share how libraries are central to lifelong learning and community engagement. On May 21st, we invite you to return for Stronger This Summer, Nutrition, Exercise, and Safety with Dr. Joseph Copiano. And finally, on May 28th, we'll take a look at the role time plays in your diet as we welcome Dr. Olivia Altanji, Altanji, for intermittent fasting and meal timing. Does when you eat matter? Register for all these and more by visiting alumni.uab.edu/events. As we wrap up, we'd love to hear from you. Your feedback helps us improve and shape our future webinar topics. Just scan the QR code on your screen to access a brief survey and share your thoughts. Once again, thank you for joining us. And as always, go Blazers.
Go Blazers.